We're here with John Benjamin Hickey, and we're talking about Manhattan. And in Manhattan, end of season 1, your character makes a big decision to talk about, to get recorded, to sort of save Charlie. What was going through your character's mind, and how does that set the board for season 2?
Yeah, I think there had been so much compartmentalizing in Frank's life, and he was doing this job for his own selfish reasons, his ego, because he wanted to be the man who created this weapon. He wanted to end the war because he knows the horrors of war all too well. And I think the two things became sort of a runaway train for him, and he threw people under the bus who were in his way or in the project's way. And I think at the end of the day, in that last episode, Frank saw an opportunity to not only save himself, but save the project and sort of also save his family. So, as far as I was concerned, he did it for all the right reasons. He saw that the train really was runaway, and that it was either now or never that he stopped this madness and figure out a way to right a whole lot of wrongs that had happened. And the only way he saw to do it was to hand over the reins to this young, brilliant scientist who he knew was capable of doing the job. And as a result, probably save himself and save his family in the end. Because, one of the great dualities of Frank is you never know whether he's doing it for a selfish reason or an unselfish reason. And I think both of those were at play in that last scene. But it feeds into season 2 because it keeps the whole project alive, because the project was about to die.
And I guess that's a real thing, for your character, for Frank, that he's juggling all these balls, and he's got all these different interests: the military interest, the family interest, the self-interest. And how do you, as a character, approach having the interest of his team as well? How do you approach having all those different interests inside the one head and sort of portraying them?
Yeah, it's such a great question. How do you keep all those balls up in the air? I think I've been a compartmentalizer in my life. I think it's one of the things I related to with Frank, and I think there are so many, as I've said, selfish and unselfish reasons why he does the things he does. But I think at the end of the day, Frank has a very large heart, because his history is a very interesting history. He was a kid in the First World War. He was an 18, 19-year-old in the First World War. And here he is as a 50-year-old finding himself back in another world war, in circumstances that he never in a million years dreamed he would revisit. And so there's an enormous amount of heartbreak that brings him to this place, but also a lot of adrenaline. I mean, I think of those soldiers that you read about who leave Afghanistan, leave Iraq, Iran, and then you read about them going back because of something that pulls them back there. I think Frank has a lot of that going on in his head. But I think, at the end of the day, what he wants more than anything is to keep his family sort of safe and protected. And I'm going back to that first question. I think that is kind of why he ends up doing what he does. Because if you remember, I tell my wife, why, what we're doing there. And I think one of the reasons Frank does that is, I think if she is included in this situation, she won't be excluded anymore. And I think he just, I think there's a lot of balls in the air, but I think at the end of the day, Frank kind of follows his heart. And for a guy who's so trapped in his head, that's a very interesting duality to to play the things that he's most emotionally connected to. You know, it's interesting because, you know, I'll be honest, theoretical nuclear physics are not something I really knew that much about before I started this job. And when you play a character as an actor, it's sort of like when you have an injured left leg, you favor your right leg, you know? And so when you're playing a man who is so freaking brilliant, who is a true genius, you know, and I'm not, I'm just an actor, you try to think of the things that are connected to his emotional life as much as his intellectual life, because those are the things that I think are more interesting to play. That makes sense.
And and you brought up his marriage, and it's a very interesting marriage. You know, you could go to like so many TV shows with different marriages. There's Breaking Bad, Sopranos, Mad Men, and like they're all different shows doing different things, but they each got very strong marriages in them. Yours has a very strong marriage too, but in a way where both sides of the marriage are equally brilliant.
Yeah.
You know, one is sort of making a sacrifice for the other, and sort of how do you view playing that marriage and obviously like acting opposite Olivia Williams?
Yeah, well, acting opposite Olivia Williams is a great thrill and honor. I've always been such a huge fan of hers, and we get to be able to play opposite her in such a dynamic marriage, in such a marriage of equals, of equal minds, equal hearts. It's really exciting to go to work every day. And you know, I think that you're absolutely right. These are these two people are both absolutely brilliant scientists, almost like genius level, and they've had this partnership for many years in which they've each made sacrifices for the other. But the thing that I think makes this marriage different, as far as just a new kind of strange dynamic in a television couple, is that I've asked my wife to make this sacrifice. I've asked this family of mine to make this sacrifice, and I cannot tell them the reason why. So they've been plucked out of their academic existence. We were at Princeton or somewhere before we came here, and we're, you know, just dropped down into the middle of the desert with absolutely no sort of normal amenities, and I'm asking her, this incredibly curious, brilliant, inquisitive woman, to be, what's the word? Docile, submissive, submit herself to this project in which I can't even come home at night and discuss with her. And I think that's one of the reasons why the show is so extraordinary, is that it is truly a domestic drama born out of this crazily secret, you know, government sanctioned suburb. And I think that's what makes the dynamic in that marriage so interesting, is that I have to keep this secret even from the person who is closest to me. And it's not like she wouldn't understand, you know, she'd understand all too well what was going on. And she does by the end of the season.
It's almost like this woman, Eliza, who's dealt with like sort of her profession is being a scientist, dealing with reason and facts and information, and having to make a decision with none of that. Like,
yeah, absolutely, that she has to just, you know, she has to play the part of a stereotypical housewife from that time and place, which is don't ask, you know, just have the house in order. And don't bother your husband about what he's doing. Well, Liza's the opposite of that kind of cliche. And it makes for, you know, very extraordinary kind of, you know, dynamic tension in the house. And you know, I think it's ultimately why Frank does what he does. You know, he saves himself, he sacrifices himself to save his family and the project.
And in some ways this weighs on your character too. And also there's the element of like your character's a scientist, someone who's about independent inquiry and questioning and researching and all this sort of like going down various paths to find out things. And he's working in this military environment where the military is all not about questioning or challenging or pushing the boundaries and things like that. So he's got this sort of like tension between his academic instincts and his and the way likes to approach things, and the environment in which he's in.
Yeah. You know, one of the most interesting sort of you know, factoids that we dealt with in creating the physical world of the show is that, you know, Groves, who created the Los Alamos project along with Oppenheimer, had at first wanted to militarize all the scientists, in the sense that he wanted to put them all in uniform. He wanted to make them part of the military. And Oppenheimer, I think it was Oppenheimer, one of the Fermi, but I'm pretty sure it was Oppenheimer, came to him and said, you can't, these people are free thinking. You can't militarize them. You can't make them look like each other and like all the other soldiers. You have to let them be their own strange, creative, brainy selves. And if you put them in uniform, you're going to suppress them in a way that they cannot be suppressed. And I think that's the great tension between the military and the kind of free-thinking scientific mind on the show. And, you know, and I think Frank is a, you know, one of the characters I think of when I first started creating this part was Hawkeye Pierce. You know, I think Frank is a guy from MASH. I think Frank is a guy who fundamentally mistrusts brass and the man. You know, I think he's a little bit of a hippie that way, because he's this weird, crazy science genius. And so you know, I think he's always kind of fighting against that part of the world that he's trapped in.
And I guess talking about this world that you've created, like, it's not just a world that we see on the TV screens, it's on a Hollywood soundstage or whatever. You actually film in New Mexico. This whole environment, this world has almost been like recreated over there. As an actor, what's it like sort of stepping into this sort of environment to act, where it might seem a bit more maybe real than other shows and other ways that TV's done?
It's certainly more, if real is the right word, it's certainly more realistic than anything I've ever been a part of, because the studio, the network, was able to acquire 10 acres of all of these outbuildings from a university, the University of Santa Fe Art and Design. And there were these outbuildings that had been built in the late 40s, early 50s. So they looked exactly like what Los Alamos looked like at the time. And so they just built out the sets, both interior and exterior, on the show. So when you put your costume on at base camp, and then you get in a van and you drive and you're taken into that 10-acre sort of epicenter, it's like you've been dropped into Jurassic Park. There was a movie from the 1970s that I remember called Westworld, and you paid, it was a weird sci-fi Western. I think it was based on a Michael Crichton novel. And you paid a lot of money, like a Jurassic Park thing, and you were dropped into the middle of the desert, and it was like a Western town, and you were given guns, and you had to be like a Wild West guy and fight yourself out of it. That was like a high stakes vacation. And that's what this feels like. You look out the window when you're shooting a scene, and you know, most television shows, you're on a soundstage when you're shooting an interior scene, and you look out the window and you're just looking at a painted scrim, you know, or a photographic image of the city of Chicago or New York, or, you know, in this case, it would have been Los Alamos, 1944. In this case, you're looking out a window, the window's open, and there are real background people in a real setting that are really doing the work that would have been going on there. So what's the word? You know, verisimilitude. It's like the atmosphere is so magical that it really does do a lot of the work for you as an actor. And to that, I give infinite, you know, credit to our production designer, set dressers, costume designer, that sort of thing. It really is like Disneyland, man. It's for an actor, it's like you've been just fully immersed, which is great.
In the middle of New Mexico, do you ever feel as trapped as the characters in the show?
Dude, I've been in New Mexico for a month and I don't have anybody to talk to. That's why I'm talking so much. I don't have anybody.
Yeah.
myself every night watching television or studying my lines. So to get to talk to you, I'm like, another human being who's not, one of my cast members who's sick of talking to me. Yeah, it's very isolated here. I mean, not Santa Fe in New Mexico is a beautiful place, and God, it's gorgeous and stunning scenery and weather, and everything about it is extraordinary. But you can imagine what it must have been like for those people, the most brilliant minds in the scientific world from all over the world, Eastern Europeans. I mean, this is one of the reasons why the Germans weren't able to move as fast in building a bomb themselves, is because so many of the brilliant Eastern European minds that were either Jewish or German or whatever had gotten the fuck out of there and had come to the United States. So we had a plethora, we had an embarrassment of riches when it came to these great minds. All of these people and their families are uprooted from their probably pretty sophisticated lives in academia or whatever, as I mentioned before, and are brought to this tiny little barbed wire fenced, makeshift government sanctioned suburb and asked to live there and sacrifice almost everything for this, what they thought was the greater good of building the bomb. And now I'm not likening being an actor who lives in New York City and coming to Santa Fe. I'm not like, it's not the same measure. It's not the same degree of sacrifice, but it's the middle. It's kind of, you're in the middle of a very remote place, and it's what makes it romantic and lonely and challenging. And it's really great. As an actor, it's amazing because all you really have is to have to focus on is your work, and that's a great thing.
We spoke with Tommy about a month ago now, and we said, "Oh, it's probably just like
speak more than I do." So I know that one person is more loquacious than me. Go ahead. Sorry.
No. And we were saying like, "Oh, it's probably just like for the actors being there, except you probably let them leave when they want, come and go as they want a bit more." And he said, "Don't bet on that."
Yeah, no. They keep a very tight leash on us, as they should. This is it's very guerrilla filmmaking, because these scripts are incredibly ambitious with huge amounts and huge number of scenes, and we only have 7 days to shoot, and it's probably a scripts that should be shot in 12 days or shot in 7. So everybody's flying on a wing and a prayer, and has to be very much ready, at the ready. And so you can't necessarily jump on a plane every time you want to and go back to New York City and catch a Broadway show or something when you have a couple of days off. It's too difficult.
WGN, you're sort of their big sort of show. Like, you're not a network that has a history of producing great dramas, but you're sort of at the forefront of that. And I guess that means you're sort of the big fish in their small pond, and sort of like, do you like sort of having a bit of like being the face of a network almost, like as a show?
I like being a fish in a pond, quite frankly. To be completely honest, I don't really think of it in those terms. When I read these scripts, I was so intrigued by the material. I found it so deeply challenging and complicated. And the idea that Sam was going to, and this network, Sam Shaw, our creator, showrunner, and Tommy Shalami, and this network, we're going to take this chance and use as a backdrop, a metaphor for the domestic drama of the show, Los Alamos and the creation of the atom bomb. I just thought that was such a ballsy move, because you could have told this story historically, fact by fact, and it's maybe one of the most extraordinary stories in American world history, because it's where the atomic age was born. It's where atomic weaponry was born. So everything that we know about warfare and the way the world works now was born in this tiny little place in New Mexico. But they decided they wanted to play with it and do some historical fiction with it. And so I felt like it was, the the fact that it was on this fledgling network, this network that had not gotten itself into the game yet, they were ready to take a big, bold chance. And it feels a little bit like, you know, you're out on the outer banks of television in some ways, even though this is a very big network who's put so much money and effort and passion behind this project. So look, the short answer to your question is I go where the really good work is, you know, and it's this wonderful part that I'm getting to play happens to be on this network that's just getting its feet wet in this world, and it's exciting. It's exciting. I think the last time I was on Gold Derby, I likened it to the Wild West, and that's a little bit what it feels like. I mean, television is like, it's crazy now. You know, I've gotten to the point where not only do I have a lot of catching up to do with friend shows and shows I've heard are brilliant. Now I'm in a dinner conversation and people will mention a show they've been watching and I've never even heard of it. So it's like its own atomic reaction television, this new golden age of television we're living in, where there's so much great shit to see, and I'm happy to be a part of that. Very happy.
And with so much great shit to see, how important is awards attention and like trying to get on the Emmy radar and, you know, as a show to stand out from that field of that so much great shit?
The Emmy radar. It's, you know, I mean, there's no two ways about it. It's incredibly important as far as your show raising its profile and getting more eyeballs on it, and it's a terrific honor to be in any kind of consideration to be in the running for that kind of attention. It's a very wonderful, you know, business thing, and I think anybody who would say otherwise, you know, would be lying. But you know, again, God, it must be very difficult to be a person who votes on stuff for Emmys right now, because it's like this, like I said before, an embarrassment of riches. There's so much great stuff in so many different places. Every year, the paradigm shifts. I remember when, you know, it was like Homeland had kind of done it for the capture the zeitgeist for Showtime. And then the next year was like the first Amazon or Netflix show, House of Cards, I guess it was like, wow, it just shifted from, you know, television to cable, now to streaming and downloading. It's like every year the paradigm shifts and the horizon gets bigger and bigger. And then you have network shows like The Good Wife, which I've been on for many years now. And, you know, those people are that's maybe one of the top 5 best dramas on television. And as Juliana has pointed out, they write 22 a year, you know, so those guys get some pretty major props from me, the way they write. Anyway, yeah, it's incredible to be considered to be even in the running for Emmys. It's a terrific honor, and anything that's good for the show, you know, is good for me.
And as you say, like the job for the voters is so tough because you've got, like, you know, the lead actor in a drama ballot is probably going to have about 50 names on it, I would guess, maybe a bit less, but like a lot of names to have to sort through, let alone a supporting ballot for the people in the supporting cast of shows, where some shows have 6 people that they're submitting in, and like, you know, you have hundreds of names that voters have to go through to tick off. It's just a nightmare, like a nightmare for voters.
Imagine. Plus, you have to sacrifice life, because if you're going to see all this shit, you're never going to have time to do anything else. And I mean, what a great thing to do, man, because there's so much great television to see. So I think it'd be really exciting to be one of those people who gets to, you know, pick and choose. You know, but I've been in the awards race before. Go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say, you've been in the awards race before. You've won the Tony. You got nominated for the Emmy for supporting actor in a miniseries a couple of years ago. What was it like being part of those 2 different award races? I guess Tonys compared to Emmys, but also winning compared to losing.
Well, I mean, let's just be honest. It's a hell of a lot more fun, you know, getting to go up there and win than it is to lose. You know, it's really, I mean, it's as cliched as it sounds, because I've heard people say this so many times, and I'm like, yeah, right. I mean, you really don't think of it in terms of winning or losing, because, you know, to be in the same room as those people whose work you admire so much. And I remember when I was up for the Tony for The Normal Heart, and I saw the other shows, and those guys were, and nothing puts the ridiculousness of comparing one performance to another. You know, nothing puts it in better perspective than to be kind of in the middle of it, because then you're like, what? Why is this a competition? And but that being said, you know, it's incredibly exciting to find yourself in a moment in time and space where that energy gets focused on you, and you don't know why or how it happens. It just, you know, sometimes it does. And the Emmys is like, it's different from the Tonys, because I feel like the Tonys, you know, it's the theater community. It seems to me to be a relatively small community. I've been in it for many, many years, and I basically know everybody. The Emmys, it's like everywhere you look, you're like, oh my God, this is like, this is just it's like a planet of wonderful actors. You know, the Tonys is like a city, a New York City, and the Emmys is just a much more vast kind of thing. But they were both fun. They were both fun to be at. And the year I was there for the Big C, Laura won that year. I just remember that. So, you know, it was like, and she wasn't able to be there that year because I think maybe she just had a baby, which is a good reason. And so it felt like the show had won. So it was, you know what? It was a great time both times, but I'm going to give the edge to actually winning. I'm going to give.
Yeah, that's fair enough. Yeah. And I think like that adds a good position. Like, I think it's easy for people who have never won an award before to say it's just an honor to be nominated. It's not really a competition, but to hear from someone who's won and also been nominated, I think there's a bit more weight because you can compare the two experiences.
Yeah, and look, you know, the cold hard truth is, of course you want to fucking win. Of course, we're you know, we live in a world that's about races and competitions and categories and who's, so, you know, there's just part of you that takes over that you know, you catch a little fever about it all. But I will say, when you are in that room, and I can't speak for anybody else, but and your name, they come up to you and like, your category is next, so make sure you're in your seat, and they bring that camera over to you. There is a part of you that you go white, and you're like, please God, say anybody's name but mine. Al Pacino is sitting just right there. I don't want to get up and make a speech in front of Al Pacino. I just want to sit here in my chair. So you want to win like a mad dog up until that moment before the commercial break, and then you're like, oh God, please say anybody's name but mine. That was at least my experience. And, you know, in one instance, I was happy to be embarrassed enough to go up there, and the other, it was just a great party.
Yeah. Oh, that's good. You've just been in my hometown, Sydney, where I am now, playing Cate Blanchett's husband in a movie. Robert Redford, Moss. Everyone was down here.
Yeah.
What was that like?
It was amazing. I mean, I'm Olivia Williams and Cate Blanchett's husband in the same year. I don't know how I stepped into such golden pile of happiness, but I did. Yeah, it's this movie called Truth, and it's based on this amazing story. CBS Evening News ran a story. It was produced by this woman, great producer named Mary Mapes, and they ran a story about Bush's National Guard service, and it was maybe slightly misinformed, and it kind of brought her down and brought Dan Rather down. It sort of accelerated his retirement. And it's that story, and it's about the news, and it's about reporting, and it's about how the kind of the blogosphere, and that was the sort of the beginning of that, all blew up. And Cate plays Mary, and Robert Redford plays Dan Rather, which is such an extraordinary thing, because you know, he has the same kind of leonine integrity that Rather does. They're both these American kind of icons, but you think Dan Rather, Robert Redford, they're nothing alike. But when you read the script, you also hear echoes of Redford as a journalist from All the President's Men. So it's this brilliant piece of kind of meta casting, I think. I mean, I haven't gotten to see the movie yet. It just sold at Cannes, which is very exciting. But the most exciting thing was getting to play opposite Kate, because I just have the greatest admiration for her. And she was a lot of fun, and it was really fun getting to kiss her and be in, you know, most of my scenes with her are very domestic scenes. And I had a blast. I had a blast working with her. I have the just greatest respect for her. And I think the only way they were able to do it, it's a quintessential American story, but I think, you know, worked with Kate's schedule that they had to shoot it in Sydney. So they recreated New York City in Sydney, of all places. I was like, well, you can't shoot a toilet flushing, can you? Because it doesn't, I'm sure they didn't do that. They thought of that. So man, I just got to work with this, you know, amazing actress, these great actors, Elizabeth Moss, Topher Grace, Dennis Quaid, but I got to spend time in your beautiful city. And I've always heard that it's like the States. And I guess in some respects it is, but one of the things I loved about Sydney and Australia is that there's no like big brother to the States identity crisis, because you guys are so far away from us that it just felt like its own magical planet. And I loved that about it. Beautiful parks and waterfront and great food. I had a great time. I should do a travel book about it. I should do a commercial. Come to Sydney.
Yeah. You've got, who's a better wife, Kate or Olivia?
Oh, come on. You really think I'm gonna say better wife, Kate or Olivia? I'm spoiled by both of them. They're both brilliantly gifted and gorgeous and sexy and fantastic senses of humor and senses of play. And you know, when you play somebody's wife or husband in a movie, it's so fucking weird, you know, because it's like you're either in bed together the first day you meet each other, and it's like you're kissing each other, but you don't really know what they are. So you have to really, you know, it's like you have to become have to create a familial bond, even though it's site specific. It's, you know, specific to that time and place. And so you above all else, I think you have to have a great sense of humor about it all. And those two women are blessed with amazing senses of humor. So I'm a very lucky guy.
And Kate's done a lot of theatre work down in Sydney with the Sydney Theatre Company. You need to get that. That'd be a great spot for you to come down here at some point if you want to get back.
I plugged it to her husband. I went to see a couple of plays. I was staying right by the opera house where they were in residence at the time, and I saw a couple of plays, and I have the greatest respect for them. And yes, I know, man. If I could, you know, it would be hard for me because I'd have to come home on Mondays from the Sydney Theatre Company, you know, so that would be a long flight. But yeah. I would do, oh, are you kidding? I would jump at the chance to come back again. There's nothing better than getting to, you know, and it's one of the great joys of this job too. It's like, you know, you get to, as an actor, when you get a job like this, you get to immerse yourself in American history circa 1944 and World War II and the building of the bombs. You get to learn all of this stuff, you know, just by virtue of your job that you maybe weren't paying too much attention to in high school. And then also you're like, wait a minute, I've always wanted to go to Sydney, but you're paying me to go, you're paying for my flight over there, and I get to play Cate Blanchett's husband when I'm there. It's like, who wouldn't want to be an actor? So it's, you know, it's a great way to kind of learn things and see the world.
Well, I told you before the chat that I've lived here my whole life and I've never gotten to play Cate Blanchett's husband. So you've done very well on your first trip.
I think your time is coming. I think you might be a little, not May, December. I'm not trying to age Kate up, but it might be May, September. But who doesn't want to see that? May, September.
Yeah.
I'll work on it.
We'll see.
I'll put a call out to Kate. Yeah.
Well, thank you, John. And when Truth comes out, it'd be great to have another chat with you to talk about Oscars and movies and things like that. All the best for Manhattan. All the best for the Emmys, not just for you, but for everyone on the show. And I'm glad you had someone to talk to the past half hour.
I'm so happy. I'll probably sleep like a baby tonight because I actually was able to kind of get out of my head for a while. So thank you for letting me go on and on. It's a great opportunity to get to talk about a show I love working on so much. So the pleasure is all mine, mate.
Thanks, John.
All right, mate. Bye-bye.